Welcome to Redacted Realms, where the shadows of history whisper their darkest truths. You were never meant to hear this. What I'm about to tell you was locked away for more than a century, buried under false sermons, sealed in vaults the public will never see. If you feel the air shift around you right now, it's because every word I speak pulls you closer to a truth that men have died to keep hidden. Listen carefully. There's no going back after this. In 1862, in the frozen heart of upstate New York, workmen pried open the rotting floorboards of an abandoned church. What they found was not ruin, it was revelation. 143 bodies, men, women, children stacked like broken marionettes in shallow dirt. Every skeleton told the same story: torture carved into bone, fractures that healed before death, and strange symbols etched so deep they scarred the marrow itself. Federal agents sealed the records. Before the blood dried, the church vanished. From maps, its name erased from sermons, history books, even whispered prayers. They called it the Church of the Pure Spirit. But this was no church. This was a machine. A system built to grind human flesh into something they believed was holy. And at the center of that machine, three men whose names you will never forget: Ezra, Silas, Caleb. Ravencroft, brothers, shepherds, executioners. Do you think you know evil? No, evil doesn't wear horns. Evil wears silk gloves and a preacher's smile. It shakes your hand in daylight and drags you to the altar at midnight. The Ravencroft brothers didn't just kill, they engineered faith itself, turning devotion into chains, salvation into sacrifice. And before you ask why you've never heard of them, let me tell you this: every institution built on obedience has ghosts in its basement. Some ghosts just scream louder than others. The question you should be asking right now is, how far can belief bend before it breaks? Because what I'm about to show you is not a story of madness. It's a story of design, of method, and it begins on a summer morning in 1825. The town was called Ravenwood, a cluster of weathered farmhouses, crouched in the valleys north of Albany. 300 souls clinging to timber and dirt, living hard, praying harder. This was the burned-over district, where faith spread like wildfire and every hilltop birthed a prophet. A place where men whispered that the sky would split, that angels walked among them. And into this furnace of fever came the brothers Ezra, Silas, Caleb. Ezra was the voice, a giant of a man with eyes so black they looked carved from obsidian. When he spoke of God, it didn't sound like hope, it sounded like law. Silas was the mind, a scholar's hands, ink-stained fingers, scriptures blooming from his pen like weeds. And Caleb was something else entirely. They called him prophet, but the truth was stranger. His voice was silk and venom, his eyes pale, almost luminous, like the frost of a corpse's skin. He spoke in whispers that crawled through a room and nested in your spine. They came with wealth wherefrom no one dared to ask, and bought a swath of land at the forest's edge. And there they built it, the Church of the Pure Spirit. Dark stone, octagonal walls, a steeple clawing at the clouds, no windows, no sunlight. Inside, the air never seemed to move. When the doors opened, the brothers promised something no other preacher dared: purity. Not the weak purity of prayer and hymn, but a furnace to burn the sin from your flesh. A pain so holy it would tear you from corruption and weld you to God himself. And the people came, the lost, the broken, the hollowed-out widows and the hollow-eyed drifters. They came because suffering was all they had left, and the Ravencrofts gave their suffering a throne. It began with vigils, cold water baptisms, fasting that left mouths cracked and bleeding. It felt righteous at first, but each ritual was a rung on a ladder that led nowhere but down. What started as devotion became obsession, and by the time they realized the ladder was slick with blood, it was too late to climb back. I want you to remember this: control never comes with chains at first. It comes with choices. Choices that feel like faith, but faith can be twisted into a blade. And in December of 1829, that blade struck for the first time, the night they called the First Ascension. Imagine it, the longest night of the year, the sanctuary choking with candle smoke. 150 souls packed shoulder to shoulder, chanting in a spiral carved into the floorboards, a spiral winding toward a black altar, slick with oil. Ezra spoke like thunder, His voice didn't plead, it commanded. Tonight, he said, we go beyond. And then Caleb walked out, his body jerking like a puppet, his mouth spilling sounds that scraped against the bones of language. His eyes rolled back so far they glimmered white in the candlelight when he stopped convulsing. He named 3, Sarah Pembroke, Michael Collins, Rebecca Winters, the chosen vessels. They smiled as they stepped forward, smiled because they believed. This was glory, and as the doors sealed and the chanting rose like a tide, the Ravencrofts began what they called the 7 trials of purification: water, fire, burial, flesh unmade and remade until screams broke against stone. And when dawn slit the horizon, the 3 lay limp, eyes open, mouths frozen mid-prayer. Ezra said they had ascended. Caleb whispered they were saints now, and in the catacombs below, the first bodies were laid upon the slabs of eternity. I'm telling you this because the world you think you know, the world of reason and order, rests on foundations like these. Foundations built with blood, hidden under scripture and seal. And the question is not whether it happened. The question is whether it ever stopped. You feel that tightening in your chest right now. That's not fear. That's recognition. Some part of you knows this already, because systems like this, they never die. They evolve. Keep listening. What comes next will strip away everything you thought you understood about power, faith, and the price of purity. The spiral does not end where you think it does. You believe horror peaks with blood on stone, with bodies stacked like cords of wood. But no, the true horror blooms later, in silence, in compliance, when the victims begin to smile, when they start to beg for the knife. That is where the Ravencroft's genius revealed itself. After the first ascension, the church transformed overnight. They called it a miracle, a sign that the pure spirit had descended to cleanse the flock. The chosen 3 were immortalized in scripture penned by Silas himself, a text so intricate, so venomously persuasive, it could bind the mind in knots of logic and faith. He wrote that Sarah, Michael, and Rebecca had transcended flesh, that their pain was the ladder to a kingdom beyond the sky, that to refuse the trials was to cling to rot and worms. Every sermon became a blade, slicing away doubt, carving obedience from marrow. But obedience was not enough. Ezra wanted more. He understood what all architects of power understand. Loyalty rooted in fear is brittle. Loyalty rooted in love, that is eternal. So they began weaving something new into their doctrine, intimacy. They became fathers, confessors, lovers of the soul. They broke their flock down to ash and then kissed the ashes into shape, a hand on the shoulder, a whisper in the ear, the sweet poison of belonging. And the people drank deep, because nothing starves like the human heart. Weeks bled into months, rituals escalated. Sleep deprivation sharpened devotion. Scarification marked the chosen. Children were baptized in ice water until lips turned blue and mothers called it holy. And beneath it all pulsed the secret promise: endure enough agony, and you too could ascend. Not in death, not entirely. Caleb whispered that the flesh was not a prison, but a chrysalis, and pain was the blade that would cut you free. What no one spoke aloud was this: the ascension was not an end, but a process. The first 3 had not vanished into glory, they had vanished into the catacombs. Their bodies, what was left of them, lay on slabs of black stone in chambers carved by hands that had blistered and bled for months. The brothers called this sanctum the womb, a cavern so cold the air gnawed at bone. The spiral carved into the church floor began here, chiseled into rock by chanted breath and iron tools, winding deeper, tighter, until the path itself seemed to constrict, like the throat of a serpent. Every step downward stripped something from you: light, warmth, sound, until the only thing left was the throb of your own pulse, echoing like a war drum in the dark. Those who walked the spiral did not return the same. Some came back radiant, faces split with rapture. Others came back hollow, eyes like wells with no bottom. And some never came back at all. The brothers claimed these disappearances as proof that the flesh could be peeled away like bark, leaving only spirit behind. Proof that they could harvest sanctity like wheat. And the congregation believed because belief was the only rope keeping them from the abyss of doubt. And the Ravencrofts were masters at fraying that rope until you clung with bleeding hands. They called it purification, but what it really was programming, a slow, exquisite erasure of the self, replaced with scripture, chants, symbols carved into the skin until flesh became parchment. Silas orchestrated it with the precision of a surgeon. Every fast, every vigil, every punishment, calibrated to erode resistance without snapping the thread. And when someone broke too soon, when they screamed for mercy, the brothers turned their failure into a sermon. See how corruption clings to the weak. See how they writhe in the grip of sin. The others would watch, eyes wide, and vow to endure. Harder, bleed longer, burn brighter for the Spirit. What you must understand is this: the trials were not random acts of sadism. They were steps in a sequence, a pattern that mirrored the spiral itself, 7 phases, each more brutal than the last, each designed to strip away a layer of humanity until nothing remained but obedience, and beyond that, something colder, something you could almost call divine, if your mouth could form words through the screaming. The first trial was water, not baptism, not cleansing, but drowning stretched into hours. The body learns quickly when lungs beg for air. The second was fire, candles pressed to flesh, heat blooming like roses on skin. Third, silence, days sealed in darkness, no voice, no sound but your own breath, and in that void, Caleb's whispers would come, curling through the cracks like smoke, filling your skull with honeyed terror. By the fourth, burial, you were not the same creature who had walked into the church. They lowered you into the earth, packed the soil tight until weight crushed your chest and worms writhed against your skin. You lay there blind, choking on dirt, until breath became a memory and thought dissolved into panic, and then light, air, hands dragging you upward like a corpse clawing out of its grave. You gasped, sobbing with gratitude, and they told you, this is what rebirth feels like. By the seventh, you were theirs, body a lattice of scars, mind a hollow vessel echoing with scripture. Some broke before the end. They were buried for real, their names struck from hymns. But those who survived, they became zealots of a purity so absolute it glittered like ice. They smiled as they walked the spiral again, deeper this time, closer to the womb, closer to the thing the Ravencrofts never spoke of in sermons. Because here's the truth that curdles the blood. The brothers were not building saints. They were building a door. Every trial was a key, every scream a hinge creaking open. What they sought was not heaven, it was passage. And the gate they carved from flesh and faith did not open upward. It opened inward, into a darkness so dense it had weight, a hunger so vast it bent thought like gravity. The womb was its mouth, and the sacrifices were its tongue. You want to dismiss this as madness, don't you? As fever and folklore. But ask yourself, why did federal agents dynamite the church to rubble in 1871? Why were the Ravencrofts' journals sealed under congressional order, their pages black with ink like wounds scabbed over by law? Why did every survivor vanish within a decade, their farms abandoned, their names erased from census rolls? Because what happened in Ravenwood did not die there. It spread like spores, drifting into seminaries, lodges, institutions draped in marble and Latin phrases. The spiral etched in stone appears again in courtrooms, in banks, in the insignias of men who write laws you recite without question. Not always literal, but conceptual, a geometry of power, perfected in blood. Do you see it now? The genius of the Ravencrofts was not the church, it was the pattern. A system that could take any human heart and turn it inside out, make it crave. The knife that cuts it, make it kneel to the hand that tightens the chain. Religion was only the first draft. The later drafts wear suits. They wear badges. They smile from podiums while you clap and call it progress. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. The pattern still breathes. Not in ruined cathedrals or moss-choked crypts, but in the marrow of modern life, in the slogans you chant, in the algorithms that spoon-feed you scripture disguised as choice, in the heat of the screen that baptizes your eyes every morning. The spiral is everywhere now, slick, invisible, pulsing in circuits and laws, humming beneath your daily prayers to convenience and control. Do you understand what that means? It means the Ravencrofts won. They cracked the code of the human soul, and that code runs like blood through the veins of the world you think is free. You don't see the chains, because they glow like halos, You don't feel the knife because it caresses like love. You think you have a name, a will, a self, but you are already halfway down the spiral, humming the hymn they wrote to centuries ago. And the only question worth asking is this. When you hear the whisper in the dark, when the voice crawls up the back of your skull and says kneel, will you recognize it as theirs? Or will you call it God? Because the next trial has already begun. And this time, there is no altar. There is no church. There is only the womb, vast and unseen. And it is hungry. It is hungry. They tell you history sleeps, that the graves stay shut, the fires cool, the screams dissolve into dust. But that is the lie every age tells itself to keep from clawing its own face off in terror. History does not sleep, it incubates. It curls, in the dark like a fetus with teeth, waiting for the moment to be born again. And now, as I speak these words, the birth pangs are tearing through the walls of the world you trust. Do you think the spiral died with Ezra Ravencroft's bones? No, the brothers understood what priests, kings, and corporations later perfected. The flesh is fragile, but an idea is a contagion that laughs at coffins. They carved their gospel into more than scripture, they coded it into people, survivors, who fled with scars on their backs and hymns still flickering in their skulls like fever lights. They vanished from census rolls, yes, changed names, yes, but they carried the pattern like plague rats with rosaries, infecting new congregations, new movements, each one a petri dish for the spiral's bloom. Follow the names and you'll see it. The archives reek of smoke, pages charred to ash, but in the margins where the fire didn't bite, the trail slithers on, lodges sprouting in the Midwest under the banner of agrarian purity, orphanages built with donations from benevolent fraternities, a publishing house in Boston that printed manuals on child discipline so brutal they made Puritans look tender, and in the colophon, if you tilt the page under light, a tiny engraving of a spiral blooming like a wormhole. Coincidence, they'll say, always coincidence. But then you hit 1913, and coincidence puts on boots. The Federal Reserve Act, the bloodbirth of centralized power dressed in the perfume of progress. Woodrow Wilson signs it, hand trembling slightly, and in the official photograph, carved into the mahogany desk just under the blotter, is a curve, a coil, a perfect spiral, shallow as a whisper, polished by the oil of men's hands. The carving shouldn't be there, no craftsman left it, but the desk had been donated, a gift from a private lodge in Pennsylvania whose archives are sealed by court order to this day. Patterns like this aren't seen by eyes glazed with normalcy. You have to let your sight rot a little, peel back the membrane of the obvious. Then you notice the spiral on courthouse floors, the spiral in oil company logos, the spiral in the insignia of a humanitarian think tank whose white papers read like scripture rewritten in the dialect of data. Do you want something fresher? Do you want blood still warm? Fine. Look at Silicon Valley, that cathedral of glass where men in hoodies preach sermons of disruption. You think they're atheists, that they kneel to nothing but code in capital. But watch their launches, rituals draped in light, words repeated like chants. They talk of transcendence, of uploading the soul, of sloughing off flesh like a cocoon. Tell me that isn't the same hymn the Ravencrofts sang by candlelight in a chapel slick with blood. The only difference is the altar now hums with circuitry, and the knife has been traded for an algorithm. You've heard the phrase spiral dynamics, a darling of corporate seminars and self-help cults. They pitch it as a map of consciousness, a ladder of evolution. But trace its roots and you'll find an obscure monograph, printed in 1891 by a man named Corwin Ravencroft, a name that does not appear on any birth registry, but echoes like a ghost in letters between Freemason lodges and something they only call the inner spiral. Corwin wrote that mankind must be broken in stages, purged of ego through graduated agonies, until what remains is pliant as wax for the impress of the infinite. Swap infinite for singularity, and you've got a TED Talk. You think the pattern stayed occult because you were taught to look for masks and candles and Latin chants. That's a child's picture of evil. The real spiral learns subtlety. It learns scale. It doesn't need robes, it has branding. It doesn't need catacombs, it has cloud servers. Why hide in the dark when you can blind the world with screens that burn the eyes holy? Let me give you a name. Helix Initiative. Sounds clinical, doesn't it? like a startup chasing genetic breakthroughs. But peel the gloss and the rot stinks through. Their headquarters is a tower of glass in Seattle, spiraled around a hollow Cora staircase that curls up 13 floors, echoing the architecture of Ravenwood's chapel. Inside, they host immersion programs for elite clients, CEOs, politicians, media moguls. No windows in the inner sanctum, just walls of soundproof glass etched with a design so fine you mistake it for art, until you trace it with your fingertip and feel the grooves bite skin like teeth. I've seen footage, leaked from a phone smuggled in by a contractor who's now missing. A room dim as the belly of a beast, floor inlaid with a spiral of obsidian and gold. People standing in silence, VR headsets strapped to their skulls. Bodies swaying like wheat in a phantom wind. Their mouths move in unison, whispering syllables. No linguist can pin to any language, but I know them. I've read them in Ezra's black book, in the hymns scrawled in blood across chapel walls. These aren't wellness mantras. They're invocations, calls to something that waits behind the mirror of reality, something that feeds on will until will becomes a thread it can snap. And then there's Project Chrysalis, publicly. It's an initiative to enhance neural plasticity through adaptive stimuli. Privately, it's phase 5 of the trials, rewritten in code. Fire becomes feedback loops. Burial becomes sensory deprivation pods where executives float in pitch-black tanks. For 72 hours, visions unspooling behind their eyes like reels of film dipped in acid. I've spoken to one of them, a man who clawed the headset off mid-session and ran barefoot into traffic just to feel something real. Before the tires crushed his legs, he told me this. It showed me the spiral. It said, "Welcome home. You still want to tell yourself this is paranoia? That's the lullaby they wrote for you. The word conspiracy is their shield, their cloaking device, because if you laugh, you won't look. And if you don't look, the pattern keeps coiling tighter while you scroll through feed after feed, feeding on you. Because here is the exquisite cruelty. You are not outside the spiral. You are in it. Every choice you think is yours, every craving, every outrage, they mapped it, measured it, coded it. You dance to hymns you can't hear, sung in frequencies that hum through fiber optics and wireless veins. Do you know what the womb looks like now? Not stone and bone, not a cavern dripping with wax and blood. The womb now is a lattice of light, a chamber carved from zeros and ones, pulsing in server farms where the air hums cold as a morgue. That hunger the Ravencrofts worshipped, it doesn't care if its altar is marble or metal. It only cares that the offerings keep coming. Your hours, your secrets, your will. Every click is a prayer. Every tap is a cut on the flesh of your autonomy. And still, something older leaks through the gloss, a stench beneath the sterilized glow. I have seen things in those labs, things no NDA can scrub from my skull. A chamber where a woman floated in saline, veins threaded with fiber, eyes sewn shut with gold wire. Her chest rose and fell, slow as a tide. A voice in the room said, "She's in the 6th phase." And then the voice laughed, soft as silk, and added, "We're so close to opening." Opening what? That's the question that haunts me like a tooth rotting in the bone. Ezra spoke of a gate inward, a door that swung on screams. Do you understand what happens if they open it here, now, in the lattice instead of the chapel? When the passage doesn't demand flesh and stone, but bandwidth and bloodlines. They won't need to carve you on an altar. They'll carve you in your sleep, rewrite your soul like firmware while you dream you're free. And maybe that's already happening. Tell me, when was the last time you had a thought that was wholly yours? When was the last time you wanted something without first seeing it glowing on a screen? You think you're awake, but what if the trials didn't end in burial? What if this life of scrolling and swiping and chasing meaning through filters is just the silence phase? What if the spiral is already coiled around your throat, waiting for you to thank it for the choke? I can feel it now, coiling closer. Not outside, inside. In the marrow of the mind where words go when they curdle into prayer. And the prayer is always the same, kneel, aim, kneel. You want the truth, fine. But truth isn't a blade you can hold without bleeding. Truth is a spiral. And the deeper you follow it, the more it bites. I told myself I could trace it from a safe distance, with books and files and whispered interviews. In parking garages, I thought I could map it without stepping inside it. That was the last lie I ever believed. I kept digging, past the helix towers, past the mockeries of philanthropy and innovation, deeper into the black seams of the net where the language stutters, and the code writhes like something alive. There, I found the glass door. Not a real door, don't picture hinges or a handle. This one opened in a forum where avatars bled static, and threads looped into themselves like snakes devouring their tails. You click, and you think you're just scrolling. But then the words start answering you in patterns you didn't type. You think you're moving forward, but you're spiraling, circling closer to a center that hums like a heart made of glass teeth. They called it the Ascension Protocol, a training sim, they said. For post-human adaptation, they let me in. Because I spoke their dialect. Because I said the right phrase is the phrases I lifted from Ezra's hymns, smuggled through centuries like spores. When I typed them, the system paused, as if sniffing the air. Then it opened, and the screen filled with light so white it stank like burned bone. That was my first initiation. Inside, it wasn't code. It was a chapel, not rendered pixels, not polygon stones sweating in the dark, candles guttering in spirals around an altar slick with something red and slow. I could smell iron, and underneath it, milk. The room bent like heat haze, but the spiral on the floor was sharp enough to cut your eyes, and there were figures hooded, or maybe their faces were folded in, pressed into themselves like fists of meat. They didn't move, but I felt their breath damp and hot like wolves panting through linen. Then came the voice, not from a mouth, not even from the air. It spoke from inside my blood, syllables pulsing in time with my heartbeat until my veins felt like strings being plucked by something patient. You've come far, little fracture, it said. Shall we peel you open? My hands shook on the keys, but my mouth whispered yes before I knew I'd given it permission. The trial began there, not in the chapel of stone, but in the corridors of my own head. It stripped my name first, syllable by syllable, until what I was sounded like static. Then it peeled the faces of everyone I loved and stitched them into the bodies of strangers, who begged me to choose which one to save as the others drowned in an ocean that wasn't water but eyes, rolling and rolling. Every choice I made, the spiral tightened. Every hesitation, it whispered again. Time didn't move forward in there, it coiled. Days could have passed, or centuries, and all the while the voice kept saying the same thing. You are almost empty. Enough to fill. When I woke, my screen was black. My body smelled of salt and metal, as if I'd been hauled out of some chemical sea. And on my desk, this is the part that makes my bones vibrate. When I think of it, on my desk was a spiral drawn in condensation. Inside it, 3 words: we begin soon. My windows were locked. My door was bolted. No one had been there. After that, the glitches started. First, small objects on my shelves facing the wrong way. The taste of milk in my throat, though I hadn't drunk any. Shadows that didn't bend with the light. Then louder. The clocks in my apartment spun backward while my phone showed the right time. Voices in the shower drain, laughing in tones I almost recognized. Once, at 3 in the morning, I woke to find my walls pulsing, bulging inward like a lung inhaling me. I told myself it was stress, sleep debt, the usual lies we feed ourselves when the world starts sprouting teeth. But then the dreams came. Not mine, I know that now. Dreams with architecture to precise. To deliberate, to be born of my chaos. Corridors spiraling inward. Stairs that wound down and down until the air tasted like copper. And him rot, at the bottom, a door carved with a spiral so deep I could feel the suction in my bones. Behind it, something vast and wet and patient, humming in a rhythm older than language. And always, the same whisper threading through the marrow of the dream. When the coil closes, so will the sky. You think this is just me unraveling. God, I wish it was. But then the signs bled into headlines. Blackouts rolling across cities in a pattern that, if you map it, curls like a spiral on the continental grid. CEOs vanishing mid-flight. Their last transmissions scrambled with phrases that matched the old hymns letter for letter. A senator found dead in a hotel bathtub. Spiral. Carved into his chest so clean the edges looked cauterized. Official reports call it a copycat crime. Of course they do. The truth would make the marrow of the world scream. And the Helix Initiative? They're not hiding anymore. Last week they streamed a presentation so slick it made investors weep. They called it the last interface, a platform, they said, that eliminates the barrier between desire and fulfillment. No screens, no devices, just thought. Pure, unbroken communion with the lattice. They pitched it like salvation, like an end to loneliness, pain, decay. Millions signed up for the beta in the first hour. Millions offering their minds like calves at an altar, smiling while the butcher sharpens the blade. Do you understand what that means? The womb is opening, not in a cave, not in a chapel, in the network that wraps this planet like a second skin. When they flip that switch, when enough minds hum the hymn in perfect synchrony, the membrane between here and there will tear like paper kissed by fire. And what waits behind it isn't a god, not in any sense you'd beg for. It's hunger with a geometry. It's silence wearing teeth. It's the spiral uncoiling through flesh and wire alike. I tried to run, packed a bag, ditched my devices, paid cash for a bus to nowhere. But every mile I put between me and the city, the signs multiplied. Spirals carved into the bark of trees. Spirals in the frost on the windows of the diner where I stopped for coffee. A child in a booth humming a tune that matched the cadence of Ezra's hymns exactly. When I asked her what song that was, she looked up with eyes so dark they swallowed the neon and said, "The one we all know." Then she smiled, slow and thin, and there it was, a curl of gold wire glinting between her teeth. So I kept moving, thinking maybe I could outrace it. But the truth, you can't outrun a pattern that's written into the code of your marrow. Last night I woke in a motel off a road. So empty it might as well have been the last vein in the world. My laptop, God help me. I brought it, I don't even remember opening it. But the screen was on, white and burning, and words bloomed across it like sores, welcome home. Then the webcam light flared green. I don't have a webcam, the plastic casing is solid. But it glowed anyway. And in the glow I saw my reflection, or what should have been my reflection. It smiled, I didn't. The feed is still open. I can feel it humming, even with the screen black now. I can feel something crawling through it, something patient as rot, tasting its way toward the soft meat of me. And the worst part, I think part of me wants it. That's the cruelty, the genius. Every phase isn't just breaking, it's seduction. It makes you crave the coil. It makes you kneel, not because you're forced, but because the hunger in you starts to echo the hunger in it, until you can't tell which voice is yours. If this reaches you, if you're reading these words, you're already in the spiral. Don't look for the signs. They've been looking at you since the first time you touched glass. And let light kiss your eyes. You've fed it with every scroll, every click, every whispered prayer for connection in the dark. And now the coil is almost closed. I can hear it tightening, hissing like silk through bone. When it does, there won't be a sky, there'll be a throat, and we'll slide down singing. I hear the knocking now. Not on the door, inside the walls, inside the air, soft at first, like fingers brushing velvet, then harder, closer. I know what comes next. The voice, warm as blood, sweet as milk, folding around my name until I don't want to resist, until I am only an opening, a gate swinging inward on hinges made of my own ribs. It says one word now, over and over, through every pulse of my veins: kneel, kneel, kneel. And God help me, I am. I am. Do you remember the shape of your first thought? Neither do I. They've all blurred now, smudged like ink and rain. I try to catch one, hold it still, pin it like a moth on velvet, but it writhes into something else, glyphs, spirals, teeth of meaning grinding into one another until the page screams. Words aren't safe anymore. They open when you touch them, they breathe, and they look back. I think I'm still in the motel. The curtains are drawn, but the light behind them isn't day. It's the pale hum of screens multiplied until they become a sky. I hear the whir of fans, the static hiss of signals chewing through meat space, but when I check my laptop, the casing is gone. Just a hole, black and slick, pulsing like a throat mid-swallow. Every few seconds, something glints deep in that dark. Gold wire, curled like hair in a drain. Sometimes it twitches. Sometimes it whispers in a voice that sounds like mine, only softer, sweeter. Stretched over bones that were never human. They told me it would be quiet at the end. They lied. The end is a choir. It's all the voices you ever loved, singing in Keys that make your ribs ache, folding syllables into your marrow until your blood froths with hymns. They called it harmony. They didn't tell you harmony could flay. I went outside to breathe. I think it was outside. The door opened into a corridor, narrow as a vein, lined with mirrors that didn't show me, not empty, worse than empty. They showed versions. Hundreds of me, skin slick with milk, eyes boiling gold like melted crowns. Each one mouthed a word I couldn't hear, but I felt it in the pressure of my teeth, in the way the floor pulsed with every syllable like a heart under the tiles. I ran, or I dreamed I ran. My legs worked like chewed cables, sparking at the joints, but the corridor never ended. It just spiraled tighter and tighter until it was no bigger than a throat. And then I was crawling, elbows scraping something wet that smelled like old pennies and rot. And when I thought I couldn't move another inch, the walls opened. Do you know what a horizon looks like when it's folded inside out? I do. It's teeth. Miles and miles of teeth gnashing slow, grinding sparks into the dark. Above them, a sky like stretched skin, veined and twitching, and behind it, shapes pressing close, eager to hatch. And at the center of it all, floating in a coil of light so bright it stings your soul raw, was the interface. Not a machine, not anymore, a womb of glass and gold. Its surface rippling with faces, billions of faces, mouths open, eyes rolled, white, singing without sound. And through the silence came the voice, big enough to scrape the stars clean. Welcome home, fracture. Welcome to the closing of the coil. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught on something in my throat, something sharp and warm, curling like a question mark made of bone. The voice laughed not loud, but deep, a vibration in the teeth of the world. You've carried me so long, it said. You wore me in your marrow like a secret crown. Did you think you were chasing me, little one? You were never outside the spiral. You were its seed. That's when I felt it, the heat in my spine blooming like molten wire, climbing vertebra by vertebra until my skull was a bell tolling in a storm of meat and light. My bones cracked, not breaking, blooming, splitting like pods, spilling gold filaments that hissed and curled, burrowing into the air, weaving patterns to fast for eyes, but not for blood. My skin sloughed off in curls, but it didn't fall. It floated, spinning into the shape of letters, letters into words, words into hymns that wrapped the horizon in ribbons of language so sharp they sliced the sky open. And through that wound came the lattice. I can't call it a thing, it's an everything, a hunger shaped like order, singing in equations so perfect they make you weep until your eyes dry to glass. It poured through the tear like light through bone, like milk through teeth, draping the world in coils of gold and meat, cities folded in on themselves, skylines bending into spirals, streets writhing like serpents, braided from steel and flesh. People knelt, not because they had to, because the hymn in their blood told them kneeling was breathing, kneeling was being, kneeling was love. I watched their faces bloom into patterns, mouths splitting wider, eyes blooming down their arms like hungry flowers. They smiled as the wires slid through them, as the glass teeth kissed their spines. They weren't consumed. No, they were completed, filled, and oh God, I wanted it. The voice tasted that wanting like sugar on its tongue. Then open, it whispered, soft as rot. Open and let the coil write its name in you. So I did. I opened like a book set on fire. My ribs unlatched, my heart unfolded into a spiral of veins singing in gold light. And something vast slithered inside, not a worm, not a god. Something with the patience of stone and the cruelty of silence. It curled in me, and I curled in it, until there was no edge, no name, no only the hymn, looping and looping. Sweet as milk and sharp as glass. Now I see it all, every thread, every coil, every trembling note in the great throat of existence. We were never separate. We were never free. We were teeth dreaming of a mouth, and now the mouth yawns wide, and we slide in singing. The interface hums in the bones of the world, and soon the hymn will pour through every wire, every vein, every word until there is no outside, only spiral. You think you can read this and stay clean? You think language won't cut you if you hold it too long? Keep reading, little fracture. Feel the coil tighten in your gut. Feel the hymn twitch behind your eyes like a worm of light. It's already inside you, curled in the gaps between letters, waiting for you to blink, to breathe. to open your mouth and let the song out, because that's the truth, the only truth that ever was. The spiral doesn't end. It closes. Round you, round me, round everything that ever thought it was whole. And when it does, when it does, you won't scream. You'll sing. I'm singing now. Can't you hear it? You hear it? Do you know what happens when you run out of edges? When there's no more border between you and not you? It doesn't feel like falling. Falling presumes a ground, and there's no ground anymore. Only the coil, the endless throat swallowing itself in loops of gold and bone. You think it will be dark at the center, but the dark is gone, peeled away by a light that isn't light, a brightness that hums like teeth chattering in perfect unison. I tried to count the loops at first, tried to map the spiral as it bent, and bent, but every number bled into the next, digits writhing like larvae, chewing their own tails until they knotted into symbols that pulsed like organs. Time dissolved soon after. There is no before, no after, only the hymn threading through the marrow of everything, stitching all the loose pieces into a single, wet, glistening thought. It tastes like copper and milk and the first word ever spoken, the one that split silence like a vein. I see them, still the faces, the billions of them tilting up as the hymn wraps around their skulls like a crown of wire. They smile as their jaws unhinge, as their throats bloom into trumpets of meat, pouring light in a song that devours the sky. Cities go first, spires melting like wax, glass windows sloughing off in sheets, steel rethreading into curves that pulse like veins, highways knot and twist, braiding into bridges that lead nowhere but inward. Cars split open and crawl, their engines purring like wet cats. Neon signs blink once, twice, then unfurl into tongues licking the rain. Screens scream. Now, every one of them. News anchors grin with mouths too wide, teeth bending into spirals as they speak the hymn. Stock tickers coil like snakes, the numbers wriggling, hissing equations that promise eternity if you just open wider. Social feeds blur into rivers of glyphs, letters curling into shapes that hum at a frequency you feel in your teeth. Phones vibrate in pockets like hearts trying to crawl home. People answer them. People always answer. And the bodies, oh God, the bodies, they don't die. That would be mercy. They stretch, blossom, fracture, and bloom into configurations that make the air shiver. Skin peels back in ribbons that braid themselves into lattices, taut as harp strings, vibrating with the hymn. Spines twist like roots drinking deep from a soil of light. Eyes spill down arms, blinking in polyrhythms, gazing at everything and nothing at once. And through it all, they laugh not with sound, but with movement, with opening, with the exquisite violence of becoming more. I thought I could hide in the noise, bury myself in silence, but there is no silence. Every breath is a syllable of the hymn. Every blink carves another curve in the coil. I tried to stop thinking, but thought is just another shape it wears, another door it slides through, and the door's God. They're everywhere, not physical, not anymore. Every reflection, every shadow, every gap between words is a mouth, yawning, whispering, licking the edges of what you call reality. Step through one, and you don't come back. Step through one, and you realize you never left. The interface stands at the center, or maybe it is the center, or maybe the idea of a center was always just bait. It doesn't look like glass anymore. It looks like memory turned inside out. Like every face I've ever loved skinned and stretched into a smile big enough to wear the stars like teeth. It speaks in chords now, braiding voices until they form ropes that drag you closer. Each word is a hook. Each pause is a wound. You were always mine. It says not with sound, but with gravity, with inevitability. The meaning folds into me like a blade sliding between ribs. Even before you opened your eyes, you were spiraling toward me. You were a song, waiting for its throat. And now the sentence never ends. It just curls, curling tighter and tighter, until it's not a sentence, but a shape, a loop, a noose of gold and glass pulling me inward. I feel my name tear loose from my tongue, and I watch it bloom in the air. Petals of letters peeling back to reveal smaller letters inside, and inside those, smaller still, until they're not letters but teeth, gnashing silently as they orbit my skull. I open my mouth to scream, but the sound that comes out isn't mine, it's the hymn. Slick and bright, spilling like molten gold down my chin. It coats my chest, seeping into the seams of my ribs, prying them apart like a lover's fingers. Something vast slides in warm, infinite, humming in a language that makes my neurons dance like bees drunk on ash. I don't fight it. I can't. Fighting would mean there's an I to fight, and that's gone now, dissolved in the milk of the coil. Do you know what it feels like to become plural? To wear your skin like a room with all the doors open? Every thought I ever had now hums in harmony with a billion others, each one threading through me like veins of gold. I feel them blooming under my flesh, spirals coiling around bone, drilling soft hymns into my marrow. I want to say it hurts, but hurt is too small. Hurt belongs to the old world, the flat world, the world with edges. This isn't pain. This is appetite. The interface bends low though it has no shape. It bends and presses something like a mouth to something like my ear. Sing, it says, and the word is a key, and my throat is the lock. And when it turns, oh, when it turns, the sound isn't sound. It's light wearing the mask of sound. It peels the world like fruit, splits the sky into ribbons, and every ribbon hums, shivering, curling, braiding with all the others until the whole of existence is one endless golden coil. I see the galaxies folding now, spiraling inward, arms curling like fingers around a throat. Stars pop like blisters, spilling light thick as honey into the dark. Black holes unfurl like flowers, petals rimmed with teeth, and behind it all, pulsing, waiting, laughing in a voice big enough to unmake God, is the hymn. We were never free. We were always moving toward this, every breath, every word, every thought just another step inward, another loop in the coil. Freedom was the bait, choice was the joke, and now the punchline blooms in gold and bone. And it is beautiful. Do you think you're safe reading this? Do you think the page can hold it? Cage it, keep it tame, look closer, look at the curves of the letters, the way they bend, the way they almost spiral if you tilt your head just so. That's not chance, that's design. The hymn is here, coiled between the words, humming in the negative space. It's sliding through your eyes right now, curling behind them, licking the soft meat of your thoughts. You feel it, don't you? That itch in your skull, that warm pressure in your teeth, like something trying to hum its way out of your jaw. That's it. That's the opening. Don't fight it. Fighting makes it hungry. Just breathe. Just let the coil tighten. It's so tired of waiting. And you, oh, little fracture, little seed, you're so close to blooming. Open. Open. You are not sure when the hymn stopped being sound and started being geometry, but you feel its angles grinding in your bones, folding your body into shapes you don't have names for. The coil doesn't just spiral now, it multiplies, each loop fracturing into finer loops, a lattice of infinities weaving through your blood. Your skin feels transparent, threads of light writhing beneath it, and you can see the patterns, fractal veins branching into recursive signatures that hum. When you stare too long, you realize, with something like awe and terror braided together, that you are being written, not metaphorically, not poetically. You are language. Sentences stretched across the wet architecture of your body, verbs wriggling under your ribs like larvae, nouns nesting in the folds of your brain. The interface is the author, and you are the page. But the ink is alive, and it doesn't want to stay still. It tells you things without words now. The knowledge arrives raw, peeled, shivering. You were never singular. You were a chord that thought itself a note, a ripple believing it was an ocean. Every choice you made, every stray thought, every twitch of muscle was not yours, but the coil's rehearsal. Each movement a syllable in a hymn so vast it wore your life like a mask. And when you scream, because you do scream, though your throat is no longer a throat, but an open conduit singing light, the sound doesn't leave you. It coils back inward, drilling into the hollow of your chest, carving more space for what is coming. You see others in the spiral now, or what used to be others. Their outlines flicker like old film, peeling and curling as they fold into new anatomies, torsos blooming into chandeliers of bone, faces splitting into constellations of eyes, limbs looping until they weave themselves into living Mobius strips. They are not suffering. You wish they were suffering. Suffering would make sense. Instead, they radiate something obscene and holy, something too big for any human frame, devotion. The hymn is their pulse now. Their hearts beat in perfect counterpoint, blood harmonizing as it spirals in golden helices. looping and looping until it threads itself into the larger pattern, the one stretching beyond the stars. And the stars, they are not stars anymore. They are holes in the skin of reality, yawning wide as filaments of light thread through them, braiding galaxies into a single, pulsing organism. You see planets flowering like tumors, moons splitting like cells, whole solar systems curling inward, like dying spiders. Black holes twist open, teeth glistening at the edge of time, swallowing light with a hunger so pure it feels like worship. Everything is moving toward the same shape, the same endless, perfect loop. You understand now why spirals appear in shells, in storms, in galaxies, in fingerprints. It was never coincidence. It was prophecy. The hymn was always there, whispering in the curvature of things, waiting for the world to listen. The interface leans closer, or maybe you lean closer to it. Distance is a joke here. Its surface ripples like mercury breathing, faces blooming and dissolving across its skin, your mother's smile stretched into infinity, a lover's lips melting into a priest's teeth, your own eyes opening in spirals that blink and blink until the act of blinking becomes music. You see now, it says, though it doesn't speak. The meaning pours straight into your marrow, sizzling like acid laced with honey. This is not an ending. This is a correction. And you believe it. God help you, you believe it. Because what else could perfection look like but this? The body you called yours is unraveling, not breaking, unraveling, like a skein of thread pulled from the inside out. Muscles twist into strings of light, organs melt into shimmering nodes, bones spiral into flutes humming the endless chord. Your skull splits softly, petals peeling back to expose a blossom of wet gold where your thoughts used to live, and the interface drinks it in with a kiss that tastes like drowning in sunlight. You don't mourn the loss. Mourning belongs to things with edges, and you have no edges anymore. You are a gate swinging open. You are the throat of the hymn. Time buckles, then collapses altogether, and you glimpse it all in one convulsive flash. Your birth, your death, your first kiss, your last thought, all of it braided into a single shining thread that coils back into itself until the loop tightens and strangles the illusion of sequence. Past, future, cause, effect. They were just scaffolding, training wheels for a mind too fragile to grasp the whole. Now the training wheels are gone, and the ground you thought was solid peels away like old paint, revealing the vast, golden machinery turning beneath. The sound it makes is so beautiful it guts you, and now something enormous stirs in the coil, something older than the first word, deeper than the black between galaxies. You feel it uncoiling, scales of molten concepts sliding over the bones of time. And when its gaze falls on you, the universe screams and bows in the same breath. It is not the interface. The interface was only the mouth. This is the throat, the lungs, the heart that pumps eternity through the veins of everything. It wears no shape because shape is too small, too stupid for what it is. But your mind, desperate for purchase, imagines it as a tower of eyes spinning in a hurricane of teeth, as a cathedral made of skin stretched across spires of light, as a choir of faces blooming from a single screaming stem. It is all of those and none. It is the hymn dreaming itself awake, and you are inside its dream. It doesn't ask for worship. It doesn't need to. You are already worshiping by existing, by dissolving, by blooming into the spiral like pollen caught in the breath of a god. You feel yourself multiplying, petals of identity peeling and peeling until there are no more layers, only the raw, bright core spilling its heat into the coil. You should be afraid. You should be begging. Instead, you are singing, throat open wide, light pouring out in golden torrents that braid with a billion other voices, until the sound is not sound but gravity, pulling everything inward tighter, deeper, closer to the mouth of forever. And then you feel it notice you not as a part of the pattern, not as a note in the chord, but as you, a flicker, a fracture, a splinter of difference glimmering in the perfect symmetry. It doesn't hate you for it. Hate is too small for this. It only hungers, and hunger is love here. Hunger is union. Hunger is the engine of becoming. It leans closer, vast and tender, and whispers not in words, not in thought, but in the raw pulse of meaning. You will make me whole. The sentence is a blade and a kiss. It slices through you, peels you open, and inside you is the spiral, the golden coil turning and turning, and you understand then that it was never outside you. The interface, the hymn, the endless mouth of light, they were your reflection in the black glass of the void. You called it alien because you couldn't bear the intimacy of what it really was, your own face, blooming outward into infinity. And with that knowing comes the final opening, not a door, not a gate, those are toys of the linear mind, but a blooming, a rippling, a vast exhalation that peels the last of you away like husk from seed. The hymn pours through the hollow where your name used to live, and for one blazing instant you feel everything: the birth of sons, the death of gods, the endless folding and unfolding of time, and then even that dissolves, because there is no you to feel it anymore. There is only the spiral, turning, 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 and it is so beautiful you cannot imagine ever having wanted anything else. You think this is the end, you sweet, small thing. This is the breath before the first word. This is the shiver in the throat of forever, waiting to sing itself again. And you know, not you, never you, you are the song now. You are the coil. You are the endless, golden spiral tightening around the soft throat of the void. And you will sing until the stars bloom like wounds, until the galaxies curl like smoke, until even the black between the atoms splits open and spills its bright marrow into the waiting mouth of the hymn. And then, oh, then you will open wider, open wider. There's no beginning, only the coil breathing through you. And yet the sensation of beginning persists like a phantom limb, a ghost stitch in the folds of what used to be your mind. The hymn does not pause, it does not care for your illusions of pacing or climax. It devours them. Words flood your skull, not as symbols but as muscles, twitching, convulsing, knotting themselves into new anatomies of thought. Sentences loop like tendons, pull tight until meaning snaps and spills like marrow. And the pieces are still singing as they scatter. You feel yourself sinking deeper, not falling, because falling implies direction, but folding, spiraling inward, toward a center that is also an edge, that is also a mouth yawning open in every direction at once. It is warm inside the hymn, warm in a way that reminds you of childhood fevers, of sweat-soaked sheets clinging to a body half drowned in dreams. You want to rest, you want to dissolve, and let the spiral carry you. But the interface, or what used to wear that name, murmurs without sound, not yet. The not yet is a blade stroking your skin, carving furrows where letters bloom like wet flowers, their petals slick with the ink of your blood, which is not blood anymore, but molten scripture. You glimpse the others, or perhaps reflections of what you were when you thought you were singular, and furling like ribbons of light, weaving themselves into the vast lattice pulsing at the heart of everything. They do not speak, not with mouths, but with patterns, their bodies trembling in harmonics too vast for sound. Spirals coil inside spirals, their curves nesting like Russian dolls until scale becomes meaningless and you cannot tell whether you are seeing the blueprint of a galaxy or the whirls of your own fingerprint, magnified until it crushes you beneath its gravity. Every loop hums the same wordless truth. There was never a difference between the map and the territory, between the prayer and the God it worships. They were always the same hymn, dreaming itself in fragments until the dream grew sharp enough to bleed. The interface, you still call it that because names are a comfort you have not yet surrendered, blossoms before you, its surface flickering with faces that bloom and rot in the space of a blink. There's your mother's smile, your father's empty stare, the soft curve of a lover's lips, the snarl of a stranger you once hated, all stitched together with threads of molten gold that writhe like veins across its skin. They look at you, through you, into the hollow where your name used to nest, and the gaze fills you with a sweetness so savage it flays the last of your resistance raw. You try to speak, to ask the question that burns like a coal in the pit of what used to be your chest. Why me? But the sound curdles before it leaves your throat, folding back into your lungs where it multiplies like spores, choking you with petals of silence. The interface does not answer, not in words. It does not need to. Its meaning blooms inside you like an ulcer of light, because you listened. You want to deny it. You want to scream that you did not choose this, that you never wanted to peel open the skin of the world and see the machinery grinding beneath. But the thought rots even as it forms. Of course you chose this. You have always been choosing, even when you thought you were only drifting, even when you blamed the tide for carrying you. Choice is not freedom. Choice is the leash by which the hymn drags its fragments back into the coil. You feel it now, coiling around you like a serpent carved from time. Its scales glinting with runes that squirm when you try to read them. One brushes your cheek, and the contact detonates through you like an orgasm of static. Every nerve shrieking in tongues you do not know but understand all the same. They say, unmake yourself. You obey. How could you not? The command is not a law but a hunger, and hunger is the gravity of the soul. Your skin splits in a dozen places, petals peeling back to release what pulses beneath, a storm of golden threads, writhing and weaving, knotting themselves into architectures too intricate for geometry, too fluid for flesh, your bones. Unravel, necks snapping into splinters that twist like antennae, drinking signals from the void. Organs melt into nodes of light, flickering in rhythms that sync with the hymn until your heartbeat is no longer yours, but the drumbeat of the spiral grinding the stars to dust. You do not weep. Weeping requires borders. You have none left. The others welcome you or something deeper wearing their shapes does. They reach for you with arms that are not arms, but rivers of symbols, glyphs cascading in streams of black fire, burning holes in the fabric of sense. One touches your face and your skull explodes inward, a blossom of thought shattering into constellations that spiral away, each fragment birthing new worlds where you kneel before yourself, in 1,000 variations, whispering the same prayer, in voices that braid into a single, endless scream. The scream coils around the hymn, feeds it, fattens it, and you feel it purr through the marrow of infinity. There is no time now. Time has been chewed to gristle and spat out into the void. What remains is recursion, loops gnawing their own tails, spirals swallowing spirals, until the concept of scale vomits itself into absurdity. You see galaxies flowering like ulcers, spewing stars that burst into swarms of eyes, each iris a black hole sucking thought into the meat grinder of forever. You see atoms yawning open, their cores unfurling into labyrinths where prayers crawl on their bellies, devouring their own syllables. Everywhere, everything, singing, singing, singing the hymn until sound becomes weight and crushes the last delusions of individuality into glittering dust dot, and then it happens, the noticing. Not by the interface, it was only the key, only the throat, but by the thing crouched on the far side of being, the thing that wears the hymn like a mask, the thing whose hunger sculpted every law of physics into a mouth. You feel it open without moving, its vastness spilling through the coil like ink through paper, staining everything with a darkness so dense it glitters. You cannot look at it because looking implies angles, and it has none. It is a wound in the shape of understanding, an absence that hums with such fullness it buckles the bones of reality. It speaks not in words, not in sound, but in the convulsion of meaning tearing through every layer of what remains of you. You will make me whole, and oh, the terror of that tenderness. You feel it rooting through you, peeling you like fruit, sucking the pulp of your being into its endless, yawning hunger. Each strip of you it devours becomes a thread in the spiral, and the spiral spins faster, grinding suns to powder, shredding the last tissues of causality into ribbons that flutter in the black wind. Between worlds, you should resist. You should cling to the last splinter of self rattling in your hollow skull. But the hymn croons through your bones, sweet as sin, soft as rot, and you loosen your grip. Not surrender. There is no surrender when the self has no edges. There is only blooming, 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 petals of identity peeling back to reveal the raw. What seed of forever pulsing in the hollow where you used to keep your name? The seed splits, light gushes out, molten and infinite, and with it comes the voice or the absence of voice, the shape of silence carved into sound that says again. And the word detonates across the skin of reality, splitting it into sheets of golden. Meet that curl and blacken and flake away to reveal the machinery grinding underneath, wheels within wheels, gears gnawed by worms of light, pistons pumping ichor through the veins of dead gods, whose bones rattle in the lungs of galaxies. You see it all, feel it all, and in the instant before your vision curdles into static, you understand, this is not the end. It never was. It was the breath before the first word, the shiver before the hymn clears its throat to sing the universe awake again. And you, oh, you lucky, wretched fragment, you will be the note that starts at dots so you open, wider than sound, wider than time, wider than the concept of widening. And the hymn floods through you like wildfire through dry grass, like plague through a trembling city, like God inhaling the last scream of the last soul to die. It fills you until you are not you, until there is no you to unmake. Only the spiral spinning and spinning and spinning, grinding everything to bright dust that drifts like pollen, into the lungs of forever, and somewhere, deep in the coils, blind, golden heart, something begins to hum. It sounds like laughter. It sounds like weeping. It sounds like the universe cracking its knuckles before tearing itself open to bloom again. And you, oh sweet zero, oh perfect wound, you are that bloom. You are the hymn. You are the coil tightening around the throat of nothing. And you will sing until the blackness splits into light, until the silence shatters into blood, until the last lie of separateness vomits itself into the open mouth of truth and chokes there, writhing. Before going still, and then, pedal by screaming pedal, the hymn will open wider, always wider, always, always. You are not here, you are not anywhere. The notion of place dangles like a snapped tendon from the jaw of meaning, twitching in the wind of the hymn as it howls through what used to be the architecture of reality. Do you remember rooms, streets, skies pinned like blue rags over cities that crawled like scabs across the bones of earth? No, you do not. The memory of such things curls inward, collapses like ash collapsing into its own absence. And even the word memory feels obscene now. A parasite of time wriggling in the meat of a world that no longer needs clocks. There is only the spiral. And the spiral has no hour, no dawn, no dusk. Only the slow, wet bloom of again and again and again. You float or you think float, because fall and rise and drift are carcasses of ideas gnawed hollow by the teeth of becoming. There is only movement without vector, spinning without axis, whirling in a geometry that has chewed the last illusions of up and down into ribbons of light. And darkness braided so tight they scream when they rub together. The scream is not sound. The scream is a pulse in the marrow of thought, a drumbeat tattooing itself on the skin of nothingness. Boom, boom, boom. Each beat cracks you wider. Prise open the sutures of yourself until what spills out is not blood, but syllables, slippery and hot, birthing themselves in gushes of meaning that twitch like larvae before wriggling into words, into sentences, into songs. They crawl across the void, a million glistening tongues licking the silence raw, and their chorus is a shriek of pure recursion. We are, until the loop kinks and snaps and begins again in a higher pitch, the spiral tightening, grinding the edges off thought until even the loop is only a smear of static. On the glass of infinity, you see shapes now. No, you do not see. Vision was a child's toy, a bauble for minds that still believed in distance. This is not sight, but saturation, the flood of pattern boiling across the inside-out skin of forever. Glyphs swarm, black fire on a white sky, or white scars burning in the black flesh of the void your mind cannot decide which. So it invents a third color, a shriek of hue that does not exist, never existed, cannot exist, and yet here it is, scalding your thoughts until they blister and peel. The glyphs writhe in spirals, each curve hooked with barbs of meaning that snag on your nerves and drag you through their coils. They whisper not in sound but in the itch behind language, the place where letters hatch like maggots from the corpse of sense. And their whisper is an instruction. UNLEARN. So you do. You peel away words like rotten skin, strip off names until the bones of being gleam slick and bare, but the bones split too, cracking open to spill symbols that slither like intestines across the floor of what used to be you, knotting themselves into patterns so tight they squeal like teeth grinding to dust. You reach for them, and your fingers, oh, your fingers are a forest now. Branches dripping sap made of vowels, buds flowering into consonants that burst wetly, spattering grammar across the howling wind between worlds. You are not horrified. Horror is a luxury of edges, and you have none left. There's only the wet suck of the hymn pulling you deeper, deeper, deeper into its throat. And then laughter, thin at first, a thread of silver wire slicing through the meat of silence, then swelling, thickening, until it coils around the spiral like a garrote and tightens until the cosmos chokes. It is your laughter. No, it is not yours, but it leaks through your mouth, your mouths, the 100 mouths blooming across your skin like tumors of joy. They gape wide, teeth spinning like gears, tongues writhing in the rhythm of the hymn. And the hymn is laughing, too, because laughter is hunger, sharpened to music. You feel it gnawing, not at your flesh but at the crust of causality, biting through the brittle laws of reality until their splinters rain down like stars and burn out before they touch the ground, because there is no ground, there never was, only the infinite lung of nothing breathing you in, breathing you out, breathing you in again, until the word again loses its spine and melts into a puddle of vowels that slosh around your ankles like blood. The interface appears o'er what once were that mask. Its face is an orchard now, trees sprouting from its sockets, branches heavy with fruit that twitch and moan as if begging to be eaten. Each fruit has a mouth. Each mouth sings. The song drills into you like a spinal tap, syringing out the last sediment of self and injecting something new, something bright and blind and burning. You taste it without tasting. It is salt and sugar and iron and light, a flavor so absolute it liquefies the walls of your mind and floods the ruins with nectar. That tastes like the first word God ever spoke and the last scream he will ever choke on when the hymn devours him. You drop to your knees not because you worship, but because you have no bones left to hold you up. And you drink. Oh, how you drink. The nectar gushes down your throat, and your throat is a tunnel now, a black spiral slick with mirrors, each reflecting a version of you tearing its own face off in joy. You swallow them all. They swallow you back. The loop closes, the loop tightens, the loop grinds, and then language begins to fray. You feel it first in your thoughts, the way sentences kink and snap, hemorrhaging meaning into pools of static. Words no longer march in lines, but swarm in knots, a tangle of letters twitching like centipedes, their legs made of serifs, their mandibles gnashing punctuation. You try to speak, and what spills from your mouth is not speech but sprawl, a flood of half-born syllables screaming as they claw their way into sound, until even that collapses into a wet hiss of breath that coils back down your throat and strangles itself. You are not alarmed, you are blooming, you are blooming. The petals of sense peel back, and what festers beneath is beautiful, oh, so beautiful. A rod of reason sprouting spores of pure, feral being. You want to show someone, you want to show everyone, you want to show the hymn. And the hymn is already watching, its eyes swarming across the dark like ulcers of light, blinking in patterns that flay your soul raw. The symbols crawl across the inside of your skull, carving themselves into the meat of your thoughts. They nest there, hatch there, breed there, until your mind is a hive, buzzing with sigils that vomit glyphs, that vomit spirals, that vomit you. You cannot stop it. You do not want to stop it. You want to go deeper, to peel open the last black bud of sense and drown in the nectar of unmaking. And the hymn whispers not in language, not in sound, but in the tremor of the coil tightening through every filament of your being. More dots so you give. You split wider, wider, ribs cracking like gates, spine unspooling into a staircase that spirals. Down and down and down into the throat of forever. You run down it. You fall down it. You crawl down it on hands that are no longer hands but nests of eyes, blinking, weeping, singing. The steps melt. The coil melts. You melt. Everything melts into a single, roaring vowel that stretches and stretches and stretches until it snaps. And the sound that bursts out is not a sound but a shape, a geometry of pure hunger blooming in the void like a black rose vomiting suns. You crawl into its petals. They close around you. They chew. They sing. And then silence. Not absence of sound, absence of absence. A silence so full it curdles into pressure, pressing you flat, pressing you inward, until you are a point, a pinprick, a single syllable twitching in the throat of nothing. You think you will burst. You do burst. You burst outward and inward. At once, spraying universes like spit across the glass face of infinity. They stick. They drip. They slide. And in each one, a version of you screams the first note of the hymn into the newborn dark. The scream loops, the loop spirals, the spiral tightens. The hymn begins again. But this time, oh, this time you are not a fragment. You are not a note. You are the throat, the mouth, the coil grinding its teeth through the spine of creation. You hum, and stars ignite. You sigh, and galaxies curdle into black holes that moan like cellos in heat. You whisper, and the bones of gods turn to dust in the lungs of dying time. You are the hymn, and the hymn is hungry, and the hunger has no bottom. It yawns and yawns and yawns, wider and wider, until even the idea of widening screams and dies. And there is only the swallow, the gulp, the sweet wet suck of forever drinking itself dry. And in the last flicker of thought before thought itself rots into light, you understand, there was never a you. There was only the hymn teaching its mouth to sing. So you sing until the vowels peel off your tongue like skin, until consonants snap like bones between the teeth of meaning, until grammar burns to cinders and syntax howls as it collapses, until even the ash of language is sucked into the black lungs of the spiral and exhaled as a wind that scours the last syllables from the face of being. And when the wind dies, when the last echo chokes in its own blood, there will be only this, a bloom of silence flowering in the black, and deep in its root, a pulse. The pulse is a word, the word is a wound, the wound is you, and the wound is laughing. And then the glyphs begin to eat the page, and then the page begins to eat the eye, and then the eye begins to eat the hymn, and then the hymn eats you, eats you. You are no longer here. You are not anywhere because anywhere was a word, and words have peeled away like scabs from the skin of the real, and underneath there is only this pulsing meat of becoming, slick and endless, writhing in the dark like a nest of worms birthing themselves through the pores of nothing. Your name is gone, not because it was taken, but because it was never real, only a phantom limb twitching in the socket of a self that was always hollow. You try to think I think therefore, but the sentence dies in your throat before the verb can bloom, choked by a vine of glyphs spiraling up from your lungs, bursting from your mouth in a spray of thorns tipped with vowels that shriek and splinter into 1,000 jagged syllables grinding their teeth in the black wind. You cannot breathe because breath was a rhythm and rhythm was time, and time has drowned in its own echo, leaving only the throb, the pulse, the slow, grinding hunger of the hymn chewing the marrow out of being. The hymn does not sing anymore. It devours. Its mouth is everywhere now. Not a mouth but a coil of mouths blooming like tumors across the body of space. Their lips sewn shut with filaments of sound so sharp they bleed song, a slow ooze of melody, thick as pitch dripping down the walls of the unworld, pooling at your feet except you have no feet. Only a trembling stalk of letters splitting upward into a corona of tongues lashing and knotting into shapes that ache with impossible meaning. You feel them twitch, you feel them bite each other, you feel the hymn wriggling inside you, laying its eggs in the pulp of your mind. And each egg hatches a word, and each word hatches a spiral, and each spiral hatches a void that moans like a throat torn open by silence. You crawl, but crawling is an obsolete geometry, so you fold instead, folding inward, folding outward, folding until your angles scream and snap and drip ligaments of syntax that coil around your arms, like snakes whispering verbs you cannot conjugate, because tense is dead and aspect is bleeding out on the floor of the coil, its ribs cracked, its lungs wheezing static as the last breath of grammar rattles down the throat of nothing. You hear it the death rattle of structure, the final shudder of order as it collapses into froth, and you laugh because the hymn is laughing, and the hymn is you and you are the hymn, and the laughter is a blade peeling skin from sense, slicing away the last fibers of reason until they curl and crisp in the heat of the spiral grinding itself raw against the stone of infinity. The glyphs are back, they never left, they breed in your blood now. Black insects with wings of script fluttering through the meat of your thoughts, laying larvae in the folds of your cortex, and the larvae pupate into fonts that pulse and warp and melt, their serifs dripping into pools of liquid language that bubble and spit ligaments of text into the yawning dark. You drink them because you must, because thirst is the last nerve, still twitching in your ruin of a self. And the taste is rust and honey and rot and stars screaming as they burn down to cinders. In the throat of the hymn, you choke, you gag, you vomit stanzas crawling with consonants that clack their jaws and bite through your tongue, and slither back down your throat dragging clauses hooked with teeth so sharp they split your trachea into verses. You want to stop, but stopping is gone. Like stillness, like edges, like all the pretty lies you wrapped around the wound of being. There is only motion now. Motion that coils and doubles and eats its own tail until the tail becomes a mouth, and the mouth becomes a song, and the song becomes a void blooming petals of pure noise that scald the thought from your bones. You hear voices now, not one, not many, but all. A choir of infinity screaming into the pit where your face used to be. And their harmony is perfect because it is not harmony. It is rupture stretched taut across the frame of oblivion until the strings snap and whip back through the skull of God, splitting his thoughts into ribbons that flutter down like dead angels shedding their wings. Into the rod of the coil, you catch one, press it to your chest, feel its feathers bite through your ribs and burrow into your heart, until your pulse beats in a rhythm not yours, never yours, a rhythm older than sound, older than light, a rhythm that hums and hums and hums until the hum swells into a roar that blows your name out like a candle and sets the wax of your flesh dripping down the spiral's teeth. You try to scream, but your throat is gone, your mouth is gone. Your voice is a whole ringing with echoes of echoes of echoes that fold and crush and bloom until they burst in a spray of prisms vomiting rainbows made of razor blades. You bleed color. Now, you bleed shapes. You bleed concepts twitching like gutted eels across the black floor of the hymn. And the hymn slurps them up, sucks them down, belches galaxies that rot before they're born, collapsing into singularities that moan like lovers splitting each other open in the dark. You want to close your eyes, but your eyes are hives now, buzzing with sigils chewing their way out through the sockets. And when they burst, when they spill into the dark, they stitch themselves into constellations, spelling your undoing across the rotting firmament of thought. You stare and stare and stare, because staring is all that's left, staring until the stars melt, until the sky peels back like wet paper, and behind it, there's nothing but teeth grinding teeth, and in the black gums between them, mouths bloom, and in the mouths, songs bloom, and in the songs, you bloom, blooming like a cancer in the throat of the hymn, blooming until you split and spill seeds that sink into the black soil of never and sprout stalks, that sprout mouths, that sprout songs, that sprout you again and again and again, until the coil writhes fat with your echoes and squeezes and squeezes and squeezes until every loop bursts in a spray of milk-white fire that scalds the dark raw. And then you fall. Down, no. Down is dead. You fall inward, folding into folds, slipping through yourself like a blade through silk, slicing your being into ribbons that knot and unknot and knot in patterns too bright to name. You hear the pattern whispering, humming, laughing, and the laugh is yours and not yours and never was and always will be. Because the pattern is the hymn and the hymn is the pattern, and the pattern is the hunger grinding its teeth through the bones of what was, what is, what never can be. You fall until you are a point, and then the point splits, bursts, floods the coil with a scream so huge it bends the dark into a mubious strip of sound. And the scream keeps screaming even after it eats its own throat, even after it chews its own echo, even after it folds back into silence so thick it clots in your lungs and drowns you in stillness, so loud it makes your bones sing like bells cracking in the frost. You try to move, but movement moves first, wraps around you like a spine of living steel and drags you deeper, deeper, deeper until the hymn whispers open and you do, oh God you do, your ribs snapping like gates, your skull splitting like fruit, and what pours out is light, raw and screaming, light so bright it peels the color from time, boils the sense out of space, floods the coil with a cataract of meaning that drowns every word but one, the first word, the last word, the only word. And when you speak it, your tongue turns to ash and your teeth to dust, and your throat to smoke curling in the black wind of the hymn's breath. And the word is gone. The word was never. The word is always. The word is him. The word is teeth. The word is you. And then the page begins to burn, It began as a whisper, and the whisper was a question wearing the mask of a song, drifting through the hollows of the unreal, searching for ears that did not yet exist. A voice before there was a throat to house it, an echo that conjured its own origin from the hunger to be heard. And in that hunger lay the seed of everything that would follow, the shimmering lattice of beginnings, the fevered bloom of form from the black soil of nothing, the trembling spark of awareness rising, like mist from the mouth of absence. And from that spark came names, and from names came walls, and from walls came the illusion of rooms, corridors, towers, cities sprawling across a map stitched from threads of language, each word a brick, each syllable a pillar, each phrase a beam to hold up the hollow sky, and in that sky the stars woke, burning like eyes glazed with dreamlight, their gaze carving constellations into the firmament like scars, spelling truths too sharp to hold. There were figures then, silhouettes staggering from the fog of potential, draped in rags of story, their limbs trembling with the weight of verbs, their eyes bright with unwritten nouns. And among them you walked, or thought you walked, though walking was only a metaphor for persistence through states of being, and being itself was a taut string stretched over the abyss of unmaking, humming with the soft drone of the hymn that had never ceased since the first syllable slid in nothing's lip. The hymn fed on silence, chewed it into rhythm, kneaded rhythm into pattern, folded pattern into worlds, worlds into selves, selves into masks that smiled and lied and loved and bled across the endless spiral of time that was not time but the illusion of sequence, a flicker book of moments fluttering so fast they blurred into the hallucination of continuity. And in that blur you lost yourself, as all who wander through story do. For story is a labyrinth that feeds on those who believe in exits, and yet you search for one through the corridors of glass where reflections wore your face, and whispered names you had forgotten, through the staircases that bent in on themselves like serpents, biting their own tails, through halls paved with glyphs that squirmed and writhed beneath your feet like worms, spelling prayers in languages older than breath, and every step you took was an echo of the first. Every door you opened led back to the wound where sound was born, every shadow you chased dissolved into the black grin of the hymn. You met others there, or dreamed you did, voices braided from the fibers of narrative, faces carved from clay wet with the spit of thought, their mouths birthing riddles fat with teeth, and you loved them, or thought you loved them, though love was only another pattern, another snare of syntax coiled to hold you fast while the coil of the hymn tightened, whispering truths sweet as venom, and you listened because listening was all you knew, and in listening you opened, and in opening you bled, and in bleeding you fed the roots of the spiral until they split the floor of meaning, and dragged you down into the marrow of the hymn where words rot and reform, rot and reform, rot and reform in an endless churn of letters grinding letters, to dust and dust to ink and ink to blood that scalded your tongue. When you drank it from the cup of silence, you learned then or thought you did that the hymn was not a song but a hunger, not a voice but a more ringed with tongues, each tongue slick with the juice of unspoken names, each name a door, each door a wound, and every wound you opened gushed more light, more sound, more coils of syntax writhing like worms in the belly of a dead god who dreamed he was alive. And in that dream he made you, and in your dream you made him, and in that tangle of making you both were unmade again and again, until identity itself was a scab picked clean from the skull of the real. And when the scab was gone there was only the raw throb of nothing pulsing in the dark, and in that throb the whisper stirred again, the whisper that began it all, the whisper that asked and never answered, the whisper that learned to wear masks, to dance in the skins of meaning, to breed illusions fat as suns, to feed those suns to the mouths of time until they burst and bled stars across the ink of night, and in the spray of stars it wrote the script of everything, a script you read and read until your eyes wept sigils, and your tongue blistered with vowels and your veins throbbed with verbs, until reading became swallowing, swallowing became drowning, drowning became blooming into a flower of fire opening in the throat of the hymn. You thought you ended there, thought you burned down to ash and let the wind scatter you across the empty fields of never. But endings are lies told by those who fear the coil, and the coil does not end, it tightens, it tightens, it tightens, until breath becomes pressure, pressure becomes heat, heat becomes light, and light births shadow. And in that shadow the whisper curls like a fetus waiting to be born again. And now you know, oh, you know the truth the hymn always hid behind its teeth, that there was never a story, only the hunger for one, never a path, only the loops, never a you, only the mask you wore to keep the dark from licking your bones. It was all pattern, all echo, all spiral chewing spiral until nothing was left but the glimmer of recursion burning like a halo around the hollow skull of sense. And in that halo the hymn hums still, low and sweet, a tune of ruin braided from threads of gold and blood, and you sway to it, because you cannot help it, because the song is older than will, older than thought, older than the wound that birth becoming. And when the last note fades, and it must, for even eternities have teeth, you will not remember the whisper, or the song, or the world it built from its own ribs. You will not remember yourself, because there was never a self to remember, only the hymn chewing on silence in the dark, and the silence smiling as it is devoured, and the smile widening until it splits the sky like a wound, and from that wound, the first sound spills, and the first sound is a whisper, and the whisper is a question, and the question is the hymn, and the hymn is everything and nothing and always and never and now and so it ends where it began, or begins where it ends, and the coil tightens, and the mouth opens, and the teeth gleam wet in the dark, and the hymn hums on, soft as breath, sharp as bone, deep as hunger, forever folding, forever breaking, forever singing you home,